You ever wonder why somebody who you know cares about you, who you know got love for you, just won't pick up that phone and call? You keep checking your messages, scrolling through old conversations, convincing yourself maybe they're just busy, but deep down you're thinking, if they love me, why don't they reach out? See, love is a funny thing. It ain't always loud. It ain't always right there in your face. Sometimes it hides behind pride, fear, ego, or just plain bad timing. And if you don't understand that, you'll end up thinking it means you're not loved, when in reality, it might mean the exact opposite. Pride is one of the most complicated barriers in human relationships. It can be a shield, a form of self-protection, or even a way to preserve dignity. But when pride grows too strong, it can outweigh action, even in the face of deep love. A person may feel every heartbeat pushing them towards you, may replay your memories in their mind, may even smile at the thought of you, yet still not take the step to call, text, or show up. Why? Because pride whispers things like, if they want me, they'll reach out first, or I'm not going to look desperate. That inner dialogue becomes louder than the voice of love, and before long, it's controlling the entire situation. The truth is, pride often stems from fear of rejection, fear of looking weak, fear of opening up only to be hurt. Instead of risking those feelings, a person might choose silence. They tell themselves they're protecting their own heart, but in reality, they're also blocking any chance of connection. It's almost like holding onto a glass of water when you're thirsty but refusing to drink because you want someone else to offer it first. The need is there, the desire is there, but the willingness to move is trapped under layers of ego. This is why you'll sometimes see two people who care deeply about each other drifting apart without any fight or argument, just silence. Each one is waiting for the other to blink first, to drop the guard, to say, I miss you. And the longer it goes on, the harder it becomes to break that silence, because now there's an added layer of, why should I be the one to give in after all this time? What could have been solved in a moment of vulnerability turns into months or years of distance, all because of pride. Sometimes pride masquerades as self-respect. It says, if they cared, they'd call me. And while self-respect is important, there's a thin line between protecting your dignity and sabotaging your own happiness. Real self-respect knows when it's okay to be the bigger person, to reach out when you feel love in your heart. Pride, on the other hand, keeps score. It treats relationships like a game of power instead of a space for love to flow freely. The hardest part is that pride doesn't erase love, it just buries it. The feelings remain, often growing stronger in silence because there's no closure, no release. That's why some people who finally reconnect after years apart will say, I never stopped loving you. They didn't stop. They just couldn't break the wall pride had built. Let's imagine a simple example. Two friends, Sarah and Michael, have been close for years. One day they have a small misunderstanding. It's not a big fight, just a miscommunication. Michael waits for Sarah to reach out first because he feels he wasn't at fault. Sarah, on the other hand, feels hurt and expects Michael to be the one to apologize. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months. Every so often, Michael thinks about texting Sarah, but his pride stops him. If she really cared, she'd call me, he tells himself. Meanwhile, Sarah feels the same way. Neither of them takes the first step, and what was once a beautiful friendship slowly fades into a memory, not because the love or care disappeared, but because pride outweighed action. That's the tragedy of pride. It lets love stay in the heart, but not in motion. And love without motion can't grow, can't heal, can't bring joy. When someone allows pride to rule over their actions, they're essentially choosing the comfort of control over the risk of vulnerability. But the irony is, love requires vulnerability. You cannot fully experience it without letting your guard down. Breaking through pride means realizing that love is not a competition. It's not about who reaches out first or who has the upper hand. It's about connection, and connection demands action. Sometimes, taking that first step doesn't mean you've lost. It means you valued the relationship more than your ego. The reward of that choice is often far greater than the temporary satisfaction of winning a silent standoff. In the end, pride can be a strong force, but love, when allowed to speak louder, has the power to move past it. The question is, which one are you feeding more? Your pride or your desire to truly connect? Because only one of them will lead you back to the people you care about. Fear of rejection is one of the most paralyzing emotions a person can experience, especially when it comes to love. Love is not just a warm, comfortable feeling. It's also an act of exposing the most delicate parts of yourself. It's saying, "Here I am. This is my heart. Please be careful with it." For some people, the idea of offering that vulnerability and being met with silence or dismissal is unbearable. So instead of reaching out, instead of risking that emotional blow, they stay quiet. They tell themselves it's safer to keep their feelings tucked away than to risk hearing an answer that will hurt. When someone loves you but doesn't contact you, fear of rejection might be at the core. They could be sitting with their phone in hand, thinking about you, even typing a message, but then deleting it before sending. In their mind, every possible negative outcome plays on repeat. What if they've moved on? What if they don't feel the same anymore? What if they laugh, ignore me, or worse, tell me they don't want me in their life? This mental loop traps them. The pain they imagine is often more intense than the reality would be, but the fear feels real enough to stop them from acting. Rejection is such a powerful deterrent because it challenges a person's sense of worth. It's not just about hearing no or being ignored. It's about what that no seems to imply. You're not enough. You don't matter. Even if those words are never spoken, the fear of feeling them can be enough to silence someone completely. They'd rather live in the safety of possibility than face the finality of an answer they don't want. This is why you might see people holding on to memories or imagining what could be, instead of creating opportunities for reconnection. The irony is that in avoiding rejection, they're actually experiencing a quieter, slower form of loss. By not reaching out, they lose the chance to hear something positive, to reconnect, to see if love can grow again. It's like standing outside a door you want to walk through, but never knocking because you're afraid it might be locked. You'll never know what's on the other side, and that unknowing can haunt you far longer than an actual no ever would. Fear of rejection is also amplified by past experiences. If someone has been hurt before, especially by someone they love deeply, they carry those wounds into every future interaction. They might think, the last time I opened up, I was left shattered. I can't go through that again. So they convince themselves that silence is strength, when in reality, it's just self-protection at the expense of possibility. To illustrate, imagine a man named Daniel who once had a deep relationship with a woman named Claire. They shared countless memories, late-night talks, shared dreams, little rituals only they understood. Life pulled them apart, but Daniel never stopped caring. Months later, he thinks about reaching out to see how she's doing. He even imagines the conversation, the way she might smile when she sees his name pop up. But then, his mind starts creating scenarios. What if she's with someone else now? What if she's deleted his number? What if she reads his message and doesn't reply? That imagined pain feels so sharp that he sets the phone down. Days pass, then weeks, then months. The love hasn't gone anywhere, but his fear has chained it in place. In time, the silence grows so big that breaking it feels impossible. Claire, on her end, might wonder why he never reached out and assume he's moved on. In truth, he was still there, just trapped behind the bars of his own fear. The saddest part is that rejection is a momentary pain, but regret can be lifelong. People often survive rejection far better than they imagine, but when they let fear control their choices, they're left with endless what ifs that never go away. Fear convinces them that staying silent protects their heart, but in reality, it can suffocate it. Overcoming the fear of rejection takes courage. The kind that says, even if the answer isn't what I hoped for, at least I'll know I tried. It's the courage to value truth over comfort, action over hesitation. Because the truth is, love that's never expressed isn't love that can grow. It's love that slowly fades in the shadows. If someone truly means something to you, sometimes the risk is worth it. You might get the answer you feared, but you might also get the connection you dreamed of. Either way, you'll have faced your fear instead of letting it quietly decide your future for you. When someone you know loves you but isn't contacting you, it's easy to assume the worst. Your mind starts running wild, imagining they've lost interest, found someone else, or simply don't care anymore. But often, the silence isn't about you at all. It's about them. Sometimes, people are fighting battles you can't see. They might be carrying heavy responsibilities, navigating emotional pain, or trying to survive situations that drain their energy to the point where they have nothing left to give. Love can still exist in the middle of all that, but their priority becomes survival, not communication. Life has a way of piling on challenges all at once. Financial struggles, family emergencies, career stress, health problems, or mental health battles can consume a person's thoughts and emotions. In these moments, even picking up the phone can feel like climbing a mountain. It's not that they don't think of you. They might think of you often. But when someone is in a state of overwhelm, their mind is focused on one thing: getting through the day. Reaching out, engaging in deep conversation, or even pretending to be okay for the sake of interaction can feel like too much to handle. When people are fighting private battles, they often withdraw because they don't want to burden others. They might believe you have your own problems and don't need to hear about theirs. They might fear being judged, misunderstood, or seen as weak. In their minds, staying silent is protecting you from their pain. They convince themselves that when they get it together, they'll come back stronger, ready to reconnect. But in the meantime, the silence can feel cold, even though it's born from love. Sometimes silence also comes from shame. A person struggling with unemployment, debt, depression, or addiction may feel embarrassed about their situation. They don't want the people they love to see them in that state. Instead of risking a conversation where their struggles might come to light, they choose to hide, hoping time will give them the chance to fix things before you notice. The problem is, time often creates more distance, and without explanation, their absence can feel like abandonment. To illustrate, imagine a woman named Emily who has a close friend, James. For years, James was the life of every conversation, funny, caring, always checking in. But over the last several months, he's been distant. Emily wonders if she did something wrong. What she doesn't know is that James lost his job unexpectedly. The bills are piling up, and he's been secretly working two part-time jobs to make ends meet. The stress is eating at him, and every day feels like a fight to stay afloat. He doesn't reach out because he's embarrassed. He thinks, I don't want her to see me like this. I'll call her when things get better. But better keeps taking longer than he expected. Emily, unaware of his struggle, starts to believe James doesn't value their friendship anymore. In reality, James values it so much that he wants to show up as his best self, but in the process of waiting for that moment, he's unintentionally creating a gap that hurts them both. This is the painful reality of hidden battles. They can cause misunderstandings that damage relationships, even when the love remains intact. Silence in these cases is not rejection, it's self-preservation, but from the outside, it's hard to tell the difference. That's why empathy is so important. Instead of jumping straight to conclusions, it's worth considering that their absence might have nothing to do with you and everything to do with what they're carrying on their shoulders. Still, it's important to remember that while understanding their silence can give you peace, it doesn't mean you have to wait endlessly or tolerate being left in the dark forever. Healthy relationships require communication, even if it's as simple as, I'm going through something right now, but I still care about you. Sometimes, people don't realize how much even a short message like that can mean to the ones who love them. At the core, fighting private battles changes the way a person engages with the world. They're not ignoring you because they don't love you. They're quiet because their energy is being consumed by the storms in their own life. If you knew the weight they were carrying, you might see that their silence isn't an absence of love. It's a sign of how much they're struggling to hold themselves together. If the relationship matters to you, reaching out with compassion instead of accusation can make a world of difference. Even a simple, I'm here if you need me, can be the lifeline they didn't know they needed. Because sometimes the people who love you the most are the very ones who disappear when life gets heavy, not because they want to leave you, but because they're trying to survive long enough to come back. Miscommunication and misunderstanding are some of the most silent but destructive forces in relationships. They don't come with dramatic arguments or clear breakups. They creep in quietly, disguised as harmless assumptions. One person starts thinking, they must be upset with me. The other starts believing, they're ignoring me because I did something wrong. Nobody checks to confirm, and nobody asks for clarity. Instead, both retreat into their own thoughts, convinced they know the truth. The tragedy is that love often remains strong and intact, but it gets locked behind a wall of unspoken words. When communication breaks down, the mind fills in the blanks. If you send a message and they take longer than usual to respond, you might start wondering if they're upset. If they don't call like they used to, you might assume they've lost interest. The problem with assumptions is that they are built on feelings, not facts. And once you start building a story in your head, it becomes harder and harder to believe anything else. Before long, what could have been cleared up in a single conversation turns into weeks or months of distance. In many cases, both people are feeling the exact same way, each one waiting for the other to make the first move. This wait game feels safer than being the one to risk vulnerability. If you're convinced the other person is upset, you might fear that reaching out will only confirm your worst thoughts. So you keep quiet, thinking you're protecting yourself from rejection or confrontation, but in reality, you're feeding the silence, and the longer it lasts, the heavier it feels. What makes miscommunication so dangerous is that it thrives on silence. When there's no exchange of truth, the brain creates its own version of events, often the most negative possible. Even small misunderstandings can become mountains when left unchecked. A casual comment taken the wrong way, a missed call, or a change in tone can be enough to plant a seed of doubt. If that seed isn't addressed, it grows roots and starts shaping how you see the other person and how you think they see you. Sometimes this pattern happens because people communicate differently. One person might believe that no news is good news, while the other thinks no news means trouble. Without realizing it, they interpret the same silence in opposite ways. This difference in expectations creates a gap, and unless someone bridges it, the gap widens until both feel disconnected. To illustrate, imagine two close friends, Alex and Maria. They've been inseparable for years, talking almost daily. One week, Alex is dealing with a big project at work and forgets to check in. Maria notices the absence, feels hurt, and assumes Alex is upset about something. Instead of asking, she decides to give Alex space, believing she's doing the right thing. Meanwhile, Alex notices Maria hasn't reached out either and starts thinking she must be angry or disappointed in him. Neither of them wants to make the other uncomfortable, so they both wait. A week turns into a month. They start missing each other, but also feeling awkward about breaking the silence after so much time. By the time one of them finally reaches out, the easy rhythm they once had feels harder to recover, all because of an unspoken misunderstanding that could have been cleared in a single message. Hey, are we okay? This is how countless friendships, romantic relationships, and even family bonds fade, not because the love ran out, but because the silence grew too big to cross. The sad part is, when people finally talk, they often realize the entire problem was in their heads. The other person wasn't angry, didn't stop caring, and wasn't intentionally ignoring them. They were just busy, distracted, or unaware of how their actions were being perceived. Breaking this cycle requires courage and humility. It means being willing to say, I might be wrong, but I want to understand, instead of assuming your interpretation is the truth. It also means giving people the benefit of the doubt and remembering that silence doesn't always equal rejection. A single honest conversation can save months or even years of unnecessary distance. The truth is, love isn't just about feeling deeply. It's about staying connected through words, even when those words feel hard to say. Miscommunication thrives in the absence of conversation, but it can't survive in the presence of honesty. Choosing to clarify instead of assume can be the difference between losing someone you love and keeping them close. Sometimes all it takes is one text, one call, or one face-to-face talk to break the walls that misunderstanding has built. And more often than not, you'll find that what you feared was never really there in the first place. One of the hardest truths to accept is that love alone is not always enough to make a relationship work. A person can care for you deeply, think about you constantly, and even imagine a future with you, yet still choose not to step forward. This is because love doesn't automatically create readiness. Being ready for a relationship means having the emotional stability, maturity, and life circumstances that allow you to show up fully for another person. Without those elements, even the strongest feelings can be held back. Sometimes people love you but know deep down they can't give you the consistency, support, or commitment you deserve. They might still be healing from past wounds, learning how to manage their emotions, or figuring out who they are as individuals. Entering a serious connection before they've done that work can lead to frustration, misunderstandings, and heartbreak. Not because they don't love you, but because they aren't equipped to maintain the love in a healthy way. In these cases, staying away can actually be an act of care, even though it feels like rejection. Readiness also means being able to integrate another person into your life without resentment or overwhelm. If someone's career is unstable, their living situation is temporary, or their mind is occupied by personal goals they haven't yet reached, they may feel that committing to you now would mean giving you a version of themselves that is distracted and incomplete. While love is emotional, readiness is practical. Both need to align for a relationship to thrive. A major factor that stops people from moving forward, even when they feel strong love, is fear of responsibility. Love isn't just about attraction and chemistry. It involves showing up in hard moments, communicating when it's uncomfortable, and putting effort into solving problems together. If a person doesn't feel capable of doing that, they might hold back rather than risk disappointing you later. This can be deeply confusing for the one on the receiving end, because you might feel their love in subtle ways, through their words, their body language, their eyes, but still see them avoid taking the next step. To illustrate, consider the story of Maya and Chris. Maya and Chris met through mutual friends and quickly developed a strong bond. They could talk for hours, made each other laugh effortlessly, and had a deep emotional connection. Chris often told Maya how much she meant to him, and his actions showed it. He remembered small details about her life, celebrated her successes, and comforted her during tough times. But when the conversation turned toward commitment, Chris would pull back. He would say, "I'm just not ready right now." Maya couldn't understand. How could someone who clearly loved her not be ready? What she didn't know was that Chris was struggling with financial instability, caring for an ill family member, and dealing with the emotional fallout from a recent breakup. He knew that while he loved Maya, he couldn't give her the consistency and stability she deserved at that moment. Rather than risk hurting her with a half-committed relationship, he chose to keep his distance, hoping that someday he could meet her at the level she deserved. From Maya's perspective, it might have felt like a painful contradiction, love paired with absence. But from Chris's point of view, it was an act of honesty. He understood that love is not just a feeling, it's a responsibility, and if he couldn't uphold that responsibility yet, stepping back was the kinder choice. This is why it's so important to understand that someone's absence doesn't always mean their love has faded. Sometimes it means they are aware of their own limitations and don't want to build something on a shaky foundation. Of course, not everyone will make the choice to wait until they're ready. Some will still try, and in many cases, it leads to avoidable pain. But when a person recognizes they can't give you the relationship you deserve right now, it can be a sign of respect, even if it feels like rejection in the moment. The challenge for the person on the receiving end is to not take this personally. Readiness is about where someone is in their own journey, not about your worth or value. You could be everything they've ever wanted and more, and still, they might not be in a place to step fully into that love. That's why patience and self-respect are key. You can't wait indefinitely for someone to be ready, but you can honor the fact that readiness is a separate ingredient from love itself. In the end, the right relationship happens when love and readiness arrive at the same time. Until then, it's better to acknowledge the reality than to force a situation that could cause more harm than good. Loving someone who isn't ready is hard, But understanding that their readiness is not a reflection of your worth can give you the clarity to decide whether to wait or to move forward with your own life. Some people, even when they love you, will step back intentionally to see what you'll do. It's not always a conscious, calculated plan. It can be instinctive. They want to know if the connection is mutual, if your care for them runs as deep as theirs does. They want to measure your willingness to put in effort when they're not the one initiating. In their mind, this is a way to gauge your energy, to see if you'll meet them halfway or if they've been carrying the relationship alone. This kind of behavior is often rooted in past experiences. Maybe they've been in relationships or friendships where they gave too much while the other person gave too little. They might have been left feeling drained and unappreciated. So now they pull back, not because they've lost interest, but because they want proof that you value them enough to close the gap. It's a self-protective move. They don't want to invest deeply again without knowing you'll do the same. The problem with testing someone's energy is that it's not always communicated. You may not know you're being tested, and so you might interpret their distance as disinterest or rejection. Meanwhile, they're silently keeping score. Did they notice I'm quieter? Did they check in? Did they make the effort? If you do reach out, they take it as a sign of genuine care. If you don't, they might decide you were never as invested as they were. This unspoken game can damage relationships because it relies on assumptions instead of open conversation. Sometimes, stepping back to test your energy isn't about manipulation, it's about clarity. They want to feel secure in your bond, and they believe the only way to know is to see what you do when they stop doing the initiating. They're looking for reassurance without having to directly ask for it. In their mind, if you truly care, you won't need prompting. You'll just act. But this mindset can backfire if both people end up pulling back at the same time, each waiting for the other to move first. To illustrate, imagine two friends, Jordan and Elise. Jordan has always been the one to send the first message, plan the meetups, and check in on Elise. Over time, Jordan starts wondering if Elise would ever reach out without that nudge. So Jordan decides to step back. No messages, no invitations, just to see what happens. Days pass. Elise notices the silence but assumes Jordan must be busy or needs space. She doesn't want to intrude, so she stays quiet too. Jordan, on the other hand, is watching the clock tick and thinking, see, she doesn't really care. In reality, both care deeply. They're just reading the situation differently. Jordan sees the silence as a lack of effort, while Elise sees it as giving space. The test fails not because the love isn't there, but because neither one communicates the real reason for the distance. Testing someone's energy can be risky because it creates an environment where love and loyalty are measured through a temporary absence instead of ongoing presence. Relationships are healthiest when both people feel free to express their needs openly. If you want to know whether someone values you, asking directly or sharing your feelings is far more effective than waiting in silence to see what happens. That said, the desire to test someone's energy often comes from a vulnerable place. It's a way of saying, I need to know you care about me as much as I care about you, but without the fear of sounding needy or insecure. Unfortunately, when done through withdrawal, it can produce misunderstandings instead of clarity. The truth is, healthy bonds are built when both people consistently give and receive energy without keeping score. If you feel like you're always the one making the effort, it's okay to express that openly instead of retreating to see if the other person notices. That conversation may feel uncomfortable, but it prevents the silent guessing game that can slowly erode trust and connection. If someone is stepping back to test your energy, the best thing you can do, if you care about them, is to respond with honesty. Show them through your actions and words that you value them, but also be willing to talk about why the distance happened in the first place. Because while love may be the foundation, open communication is the bridge that keeps you connected. Not everyone shows love the same way. For some, love is expressed through constant communication, calls, texts, daily check-ins. For others, love is expressed through presence, service, or small tangible actions when they're physically near you. This difference in love languages can cause deep misunderstandings, especially in times of physical distance. If you're someone who equates love with frequent messages, and the person you care about isn't wired that way, their silence can feel like indifference. But for them, love may not travel through words or devices. It may live in the things they do when they're with you. This difference comes down to personal wiring, upbringing, and experiences. Some people grew up in families where affection was shown through doing, cooking for each other, fixing things, sharing resources, rather than through verbal affirmation or emotional conversation. When these individuals care for someone, they might instinctively show it through action, not words. So, when they're apart from you, they may not feel the urge to send multiple messages a day because in their mind, the love is steady and obvious. They don't realize that for you, the silence feels like distance. The tricky part is that in a world where constant communication is common, someone whose love language doesn't naturally include texting can be misunderstood. You might start to think they've pulled away when in reality, their feelings haven't changed at all. They might even assume you know how they feel because it hasn't changed, not realizing that you need reminders in order to feel secure. This can lead to unnecessary tension where one person feels unloved and the other feels confused about why their love is being questioned. This difference in expression becomes more noticeable in long-distance situations when you can't see the physical gestures, the cooked meals, the errands run, the thoughtful acts. There's no obvious proof of love unless it's communicated. And for someone whose natural instinct isn't verbal expression, that gap can feel huge. It's not that they don't care, it's that their preferred way of showing care doesn't translate well across distance. To illustrate, imagine Hannah and Liam. When they're together, Liam is the most attentive partner. He notices when Hannah's coffee is running low and buys her more without being asked. He fixes things around her apartment, and he always makes sure she gets home safely. He's not the type to shower her with, "I love you," texts, but when she's in his presence, his actions speak volumes. Then Liam gets sent out of town for work for several weeks. During that time, he sends a quick text every few days, but that's it. Hannah, whose love language is words of affirmation and frequent contact, starts to worry. She wonders if he's losing interest, if the distance has made him drift. From Liam's perspective, nothing has changed. He still loves her, but he doesn't think to express it through constant messaging. He assumes she knows his feelings are solid. For Hannah, the silence feels like a crack in their connection. The truth is, the love is still there. It's just locked in Liam's preferred mode of expression, which doesn't translate well over long distance. This is why understanding that love can be expressed differently is crucial. Without that understanding, it's easy to misinterpret someone's intentions. You might think they're cold, detached, or less committed, when in reality they're just showing love in the way they've always known. That doesn't mean you have to accept a style of love that leaves you feeling empty. But it does mean it's worth having an open conversation about how you each give and receive love. Learning someone's love language and letting them learn yours can close this gap. If your partner or loved one shows love through actions, you can appreciate those gestures while also expressing your need for more verbal or written affirmation when apart. They might not naturally think to send daily check-ins, but if they know it makes you feel secure, they can make the effort. Similarly, you can recognize that their quieter style isn't a lack of love, but simply a different translation of it. The key is not to measure love only by the way you prefer to receive it, but to also see it through the lens of the other person's way of giving it. When you do, you stop interpreting their differences as flaws and start recognizing them as unique forms of expression. That shift can save you from misreading love as absence just because it speaks in a language you weren't expecting. So if someone you know loves you hasn't been contacting you, don't always take it as proof they don't care. It might be pride, fear, life struggles, or just their own way of loving. But here's the key. You can't control how somebody else moves. You can control how you respond. Don't let silence destroy your peace. If you care, reach out. If you've tried and they still don't step forward, love yourself enough to keep living your life. Because the right people will never let too much silence stand between you and them. Sometimes the loudest, "I love you," is in what someone does when they finally get the courage to break that silence. And until then, you keep walking in your worth.